And the ominous countdown brings us in. Welcome, everybody, to the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner. And today I'm super excited to have my old friend Kyle Mills joining us back on the show today. Kyle has a brand new book. It's called Fade In, and it releases this coming Tuesday. I think we just used all of our math skills to figure out that the 29th is this coming Tuesday, and it comes out. Um, Kyle, did you write 9 of the Vince Flynn, Mitch Rapp books?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard to believe.
So if you are a fan of political / military thrillers and someone who followed Vince Flynn and his writing career before his untimely passing, Kyle picked up that mantle and carried on those well-loved characters, brought them into uh, modern times, and kept evolving and growing that character, and had you published some exceptional books. But I think you had a fun time doing it, and I remember last year we talked at I forget what time of year it was, but you said, by the way, next year I'm going to have a different book coming out, and I was so looking forward to it, and it's here now. And this book resurrects a well-loved character from a while ago. I believe Fade is a character that you wrote in a couple of books before taking on
Just one. Just one. And
Okay.
it actually just had its 20th anniversary.
That I wanted to say 20 years, but in my mind, I was like, me or Kyle are neither one old enough to, have a monument like that. So, welcome, Kyle. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think this is got to be like our 10th year in a row talking about books, and not really, but it feels like it. How's it going? Are you guys back in the States now? Because I know for a while you guys were doing like 1 year in the States and 1 year traveling abroad or something like that.
Yeah. So we are in the States right now. You can see by the buffalo head above my head there. But we'll be leaving again. We have a house in Spain, so we do 1 year in the United States and then 1 year in Spain. And so because when this book was coming out, we've sort of delayed our trip back to Spain. But when I get back from tour, we've got a week or something, and then that's the scramble to pack up and move. I think we're moving back August 19th.
Wow. Your house in the States, do you guys rent it out, or
we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we live in Wyoming, and it's better to have somebody in it because if it froze, it would be a bad thing.
Yeah, or a family of bears has moved in.
Yeah,
you never
exactly.
know, or moose, or whatever you guys have in Wyoming. I've often wondered, as a writer, sort of empathy is one of our superpowers, and when you're writing about world events, especially, what benefit does getting outside the United States, experiencing another culture, experiencing kind of the American way of life from the outside looking in, that has to be a tremendous benefit, if not a bit of a shock.
Yeah, I've been lucky to live all over. I've lived in London, Spain. We've spent a fair amount of time in South Africa, the Middle East. So absolutely. I mean, empathy is the key to writing characters. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the person you're writing about. And, it might not be a person you like. It might not be a person you agree with. Some people are really different. You just writing women, for instance.
Yeah.
So I love doing that. And the more different a character is from me, the more of an interesting challenge it is. And yeah, the cultural differences, if you're writing international thrillers that you have to try to understand. And I mean, it's really fun, but I'll tell you, it's a challenge. Even Spain, where I've lived for years, getting a handle on the language, the culture, not making sort of cultural errors and stuff. I still do it all the time and think, oh man, I can't believe I just did that or said that. Perfectly acceptable in the United States, but not flying too well here.
I can understand that would be a challenge for sure. So you have spent the better part of a decade writing in Vince Flynn's sandbox and put out some amazing novels, like we mentioned earlier. What was the motivation, the impetus to kind of break out of that comfortable sandbox? I'm assuming it got to be pretty comfortable because it was pretty successful and people were loving what you were doing with the characters in the world. But there came a time where did it start to feel stifling? Did you want to go in a different direction? Like, what was some of the decision points that you wrestled with, or was it a wrestle?
Well, it's funny. I wrote, so the last book I wrote was Code Red. The one before that, I think it was Oath of Loyalty. With Oath of Loyalty, I almost felt like I had finished a big arc. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because people got in touch with me and said, we loved what you did with this series. This was such a fitting end to it. And I was like, well, it's not over. In fact, I have one more book to do on my contract. But in a way, it did feel like kind of a fitting end to my time there. I had taken Mitch from being this really angry kind of guy who was very alone to maturing. Well, another 10 years, he found a partner. He had more or less a daughter. And I don't know, it was kind of a situation where it was like, okay, where am I going to take him next? I almost needed to come up with another sort of 10-book arc.
Right.
The threat of Islamic terrorism, which was very prevalent when Vince started this.
Sure.
And for years later is subsiding to some extent. And it was a big decision. I felt like it was either kind of end it here or this is your career for forevermore. You are the writer of this series. You're going to write more of these books than Vince did, and talk to the publisher and whatever, do a deal for like a 10-book deal or something. So, and that was doable, but I think I would have wanted to really evolve the series quite a bit. And I didn't feel like it was mine to do that with, because the threats now are so different than they were. You had the very black and white, Arab terrorist wants to kill a bunch of people. They're bad. We're good. We're trying to save people's lives. It's very clear cut, very action oriented. And, the threats today are more, I don't know, they're more insidious. They're more complex. It's AI, or it's the internal divisions in the United States. It's runaway technology. It's, all these things, the irrationality coming out of places like, the Middle East and Russia. And I wanted to tell that story, and I needed a character whose eyes, who would see that in an interesting way. That, Fate is a bit, some little times manic depressive. He's a bit of a pop philosopher. He tends to get dragged along into things that are over his head. And I think because of that, like, I empathize with that character. Like, I feel like, I totally get where he's coming from. Whereas, somebody like Mitch is very much very in control, very much the master of his own universe.
Sure.
So these were the things I was thinking about. I loved that character. My fans really loved that character. I still was getting a ton of mail about him. And he just seemed like the right person to tell the current story. So all those things kind of went into my decision to leave the Mitch Rapp franchise and kind of explore on my own a little bit.
Well, it's funny because fiction allows us to sort of troubleshoot our world in a way from the comfort of our reading chair. I talk with horror writers a lot, and it's interesting because people that are like genuinely nice people, will gravitate towards some of the most horrific stories that but it's like it allows us to confront some things from the safety, of our cozy, warm or cool house at this time of year, and not have to get our hands dirty. And Mitch Rapp, and you talked about evolving that character. And I'd like to touch on that a bit more in just a minute, but he definitely is a character from a time where the world was a little different. It seems like the struggles that we found ourselves in seemed to be very clear cut, very it's us versus them. People that looked like that are typically not to be trusted. Whereas we, because we look different, we are, anyway, you know what I'm saying. But what we've realized is that, over the last couple of decades is maybe some of the things that we thought were so clear cut in black and white weren't really. And the world has always been more complex than we thought. But fiction allows us to, kind of play out these scenarios in different ways. And one thing that I love about Fade is that this book, especially in Fade In, we find ourselves just right off the bat in morally questionable territory for a lot of different reasons. And I'll let you say what you want to, but I don't want to give too many things away. But, the good guys, are they all good? If we do things to our own people for certain reasons, like what does that say about us? And fiction allows us to really go down all these rabbit trails and hopefully get to make some decisions, make some, gives us a trial run before we do things for real. Do you think of fiction in those kind of high and lofty terms, or am I putting too much weight on, telling fun stories?
I mean, I certainly do. I like, if you read my books versus say the Vince Flynn books that I wrote, Vince's books were very much, one of their hallmarks was that they, it was very much a good versus evil feel. I mean, they were kind of modern Westerns, right? The lone gunman comes into town. There are all these horrible people and he saves the day, which are great classic stories. Super fun to write, super fun to read. I've always worked a little more in the gray between the black and white in perspective. I mean, in fact, I wrote an entire book many years ago called Sphere of Influence. And my entire idea was kind of, why is something this illegal in one place and not another? Like, are laws absolute? Is that good and evil? Why is it terrible for me to, gamble in Utah, but if I walk 12 feet across the Nevada border, it's not only allowed, it's encouraged, right? So these are the things that are, I think, very interesting. I mean, if you think about even Muslim communities in the Middle East, their views, or Africa, where we lived for a while, are very, very different than ours. And if you really step back and try to let go of, the culture that you grew up in, you can very much see their perspective. So that's what I like to explore, and certainly John Lowe, one of the characters in this book, struggles with this. He knows that the power of the elite is becoming incredible. But the combination of the political elite and the billionaires who control all the media that we see, can use AIs for algorithms to feed us exactly what we want, to manipulate us. That's becoming much, much more powerful with the advent of AI, in that they can target each person individually even more than they did before. They know everything about us in a way that even the Stasi couldn't have ever known. I mean, everything we've ever bought, everywhere we are, where we've been. I mean, all our friends, of what our thoughts are. So these things are a threat to liberty. But on the other hand, without some sense of some sort of control over this, you could end up with chaos. So where do that's a difficult tightrope to walk. And that's what he's struggling with, the fact that he has become extraordinarily powerful. He's not an elected official. And what is he going to do? The world's becoming really unstable and unpredictable. And can he kind of calm it down? And that's his goal. But, he wonders, who gave him the authority, and does absolute power corrupt absolutely? I mean, in fact, in his world, he had this plan to do this, but it's worked way better than he thought. And he's become very, very powerful without the control systems that he intended to put in place, because he couldn't get those done as quickly. So, damned by his own success to some extent. And Feyd gets sucked into all this. And Feyd has an interesting moral compass. Sometimes it's a little bent, but it's definitely not broken. And he thinks a lot about what's right and wrong, and the complexities of the world that he's sort of been thrust into. So hopefully people will, take that away, and it'll give them reason to think about some of these things.
Yeah. When writing a character like Mitch Rapp, who was an established character in someone else's universe, how much freedom do you have? You talked about maturing that character, and how much freedom do you have to grow that character? There are certain series that are wildly popular, and each book, the character is basically the same. Like they don't really have a huge character growth arc. Looking at you, Reacher. But people love that series for different reasons. And the things that you did with Mitch Rapp, by expanding his horizons, different personal growth and things like that. Like, how free are you to do that, as opposed to with a character like Feyd, where you are the master of his universe? And what are just the way you approach these characters? Is when writing Feyd, is there a freedom that you didn't have with Mitch Rapp?
Oh, sure. It kind of depends on the franchise. So I wrote some books for Robert Ludlum.
Yeah.
And they were very much against any kind of arc in that. So I wrote three books that to me felt standalone. It was about the same guy, but they just really adamantly did not want that series to go anywhere.
Wow.
And subsequently it did not.
It did. Right.
Not surprisingly.
Yeah.
With the Mitch Rapp stuff, that was an interesting one because so I had virtually free hand. I don't think anybody ever told me what to do with that. But I felt the reason they didn't tell me what to do is because I was always sort of the one that was really nervous about what I was doing with the series, because, if it ain't broke, right? Yeah. And the major thing with that was when I took it over, the Mitch Rapp character was really angry and frustrated. And I felt unsustainably so. Mm-hmm. And there are also a couple of characters I didn't understand that I ended up killing off. But I didn't feel like I didn't feel like it would be. So, it made sense, right? Like Vince had arced him from like being in college to where he was. And it was totally understandable why he was angry and frustrated. His wife had been, unborn child had been blown up. Et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't feel like that was going to be sustainable for the next 10 books. So I wanted to bring him off the edge. I felt like he was going to jump off a building or something. So I brought him back from the edge slowly and sort of gave him some other reasons to be a little more positive and all that. So, but I fundamentally, I also threw him up against Russia instead of and some other things, a domestic terrorist who took down the power grid and all these things. So it wasn't just all Islamic terrorism, as that was moving into kind of a 9/11 era. It felt like very much a 9/11 era book. So I think I had a lot of free hand. I honestly think that I could have simply said, I want to take this next 10 book arc in a really different direction. I think they would have said fine. But I don't know. I just didn't feel like that was my place. You know, I didn't know if fans would like it. I think Vince would have done it. You know, I mean, Vince wrote about terrorism because that's what was happening. So I'm convinced if he was alive today writing that, wouldn't be writing about terrorism. He'd probably be writing about, whatever, something else.
Yeah.
So, Russian Ukraine or Hamas or whatever. So I think that's necessary in a thriller, in that you want it to stay current. You want it to feel, that, I mean, it's cliche, but that ripped from the headlines sort of feel to it. So so I had a lot of free reign there. But now with Fade, I mean, now I'm marking it to 2025, right? It's very little universe. I mean, there was a first book 20 years ago, but it reads a little more like a prequel. I mean, this is meant to be the first in the series. And I can kind of create any character I want. His personality can be whatever I want. The people surrounding him's personalities, I can build around him, as opposed to like Scott Coleman, Stan Hurley, and all those people that had long, rich histories. You can't have Irene Kennedy suddenly turn into an idiot, right? So I mean, it's a completely different feel. And the idea that I don't constantly have to think, would Vince have written this?
Yeah.
Or would Vince have said this? I can just say and do whatever I want.
Well, speaking of that cast of characters, one of the things that we love about a long running series is this lush cast of characters that kind of crop up around these characters. Yeah, it's a Mitch Rapp series, but it's Mitch and his world that we're getting. And I would imagine that as the writer, you sit down and you have all these set pieces already. And you're just figuring out a way to tell a story within the confines of this, but you don't have to rebuild the world every time. All these things exist and these relationships exist, and you get to, how would this play against this existing relationship? And the readers carry something with them into the book as well, because we're bringing all the experiences we've read about with these characters, and you don't have to tell us everything. We're bringing some of that with us. Well, when you're writing essentially book one in a series with this, we've got this main character that people remember, but it was 20 years ago. So, you're really having to rebuild this character in our minds, because a lot's happened, since the last time we read about Fade. But then you also have to build all these relationships and how this character plays against this character, and, all of this kind of stuff. When you sit down to write a new Fade book, what's the world building like? And by world, I mean like the relationships and all of the secondary characters and all of these pieces that ultimately hold the world up.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the world is much less complicated than the Mitch Rapp world, because it's the real world now. Whereas you had the Rapp verse before, that's 20 odd books, so you have to remember everything that's happened in that. With this one, I mean, I like to have really interesting secondary characters. You saw that even in the Mitch Rapp book with Scott Coleman, right? That was a really interesting character, but he was kind of a sketch when Vince did him. And I wanted to give him more background, more of a personality of his own, like more of his own thing going on, a rapport with Mitch that was really unique and all that. So this is kind of what I want to do in all my books. So Fade's, relationships are complicated. The people surrounding him are complicated. I mean, it's funny. We did these character sketches that were just sort of fun to put on social media. There were pictures of the characters and a little bit about them, sort of like you'd see in a video game,
Sure.
And like one of the characters is named Raya, and my wife said, what do you want to say about Raya? And I was like, you cannot distill her into this. It was like 5 points about them or something. I was like, there's just no way to do it. I just left her out. Like, I just could not summarize.
Yeah. How do you put 30 points into 5?
Yeah. And that's kind of the way with a lot of his friends, Matt Egan and everything that's happened to him that created who he is today versus even who he was in the original Feyd, and how his relationship with Feyd was once, they were best friends, and now it's really deteriorated. It's pretty ugly. So those are really fun things to play with, and it's fun to get them across in an efficient way that you don't have to, you don't want to rehash a ton of stuff, and that's true. And it's one of the problems with long series too, is like you were saying with the Mitch Rapp stuff. Well, you don't have to rehash this because we know it, but you always also have to be thinking about the person who's picking up that book for the first time. So that book, like book number 24 or whatever it was in the Mitch Rapp series that I wrote, I have to think this, like there are fans that literally read the entire series again and finish it right before the new book comes out, right? So I have to think that it's extreme to the person who's never even heard of Mitch Rapp. Just pick the book up at an airport or something. It has to work for both people, which is, man, it's like just a constant calculation of, have I said enough? Have I said it in a different way than I've said it before? Like all these things. So you don't bore one person and confuse the other. So truth be told, doing number one of a series is fun because you don't have to worry about that. You figure no one knows anything about this.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, you've got all of these characters, and there's a lot of backstory to these characters because everyone brings their story with them. But how do you decide what to reveal and what you're going to tease out in future books? Like, do you map out characters? Like, I know this about this character, but the reader doesn't necessarily know about it. And maybe this will come out in book 2 or 3 or whatever, where do you give each of your characters, kind of a long lead, knowing that there will be things that reveal about them as the series goes on?
I don't really plan it out because I kind of inhabit these characters, and they sometimes surprise me. It's really hard for me to say, I'm going to build this character in the first book, and now I have a really strong sense of who they are, like who they're going to be and all that. Like, I mean, a good example is I just finished the first draft of the next Feyd book. And there's a character named Linnea, and you don't know that much about her in this book, other than she's a former Finnish sniper and doesn't get along with Feyd very well. But she's talking about her motivations in the new book, and she's talking about her partner. And she said, I'm typing along, and she said she. And I was like, I didn't know she was gay. But like that was not a plan. But as she was speaking, that's what I felt. And so that, like, I was surprised. So it's a journey for me too, as these characters reveal themselves to me, both through their actions and what they say and background, where all of a sudden it just springs into my mind. I mean, like, it sprung into my mind. I know who her partner is. I know where they live, what their house looks like, and all this stuff. And I don't know, it may never come up. Like, Feyd may never go to her house or meet this woman, but I know who that is. And I don't know why those things spring into my head, but they do.
But it's interesting because if you as the writer know and understand these things, then these circumstances might ultimately affect their behavior at some point in the future. And it may never come up for you to tell the reader everything you know, but in some way it filters. When you're writing the character, it filters through all those things that you do know. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, sometimes the reader doesn't have to know all the gory details, but because you know those details, everything about them kind of filters through that. And so
that's absolutely true. Like, I know everything about what Feyd's high school, like his relationship with his parents, where he lived, what his apartment looked like. Did they speak Arabic in his house? Because his real name's Salam Al-Fayed. His parents were first generation immigrants from Syria. What did they eat? Did they eat, largely traditional Syrian. Yeah, so I know all those things about Fade. Now, is it ever going to come out? Probably not. It's not that important. But I know, like, I mean, even like his mother, he talks sometimes about books that he read when she read him when he was a little kid. And it's because I know about his relationship with his mother, and I can picture her reading him Charlotte's Web, you know? So I think those things are really important to being able to effortlessly create characters who feel real and who feel like they're motivated. I hate reading books. It's probably less books, because I think novels are pretty good at this, but a lot of times it's movies where you watch it and you think, why on earth would that character have done that? Like, hey, they've been portrayed really smart and they do something really stupid, or like whatever. And so it takes me out of the world that I'm supposed to be immersed in and lost in whenever somebody does something that's really or says something that's really out of character. So that's very important to me when I'm creating a novel.
And for a character to be consistent with their creation and to be consistent to their world and their worldview.
And I want them, they need to feel real. And if people hate the person, and other people like him, that's great, because I feel like that's real. That's really what happens. Some people are going to look at Fade, and Fade's a pretty wacky guy. I mean, you know, he kills a lot of people, and he has a very dark sense of humor. And like I said, he's got a weird moral compass. And same with John Lowe. Some people are going to, and people have said, when I first started the book, I thought John Lowe was the villain. And then at the end, I wasn't sure anymore. Like, I mean, that's the way real people are, right?
Yeah.
You know, they're not good, not demons, they're not angels. They're all somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. They're human, and human is a very flawed creature for sure. So Fade is a character you created 20 years ago, and you said that all through the years, people had continued to ask about this character to the point that you decided he needed a series all his own. What is it about this character that resonated so deeply with people that he's mentioned in a book 20 years ago and people just can't leave him alone?
I don't know. Honestly, I wrote that book and I really enjoyed writing that book. But
and tell people which book that he originally appeared in.
This was the first book. It was just called Fade.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was not prepared for the kind of overwhelming response I got to that character, because I mean, particularly in the first one, he's pretty nutty and he's suicidal, and I mean, he's trying to kill all these guys from Homeland Security, and it turns into this big battle. But I think in the end, what people loved about him was, one, his sense of humor, but also the fact that on his surface, okay, he might drink too much, he might take some drugs, a couple of hookers, but he really does have a strong moral compass. He's a very decent, like, loyal person, courageous, and all these things. And despite the fact that maybe he has some problems with his country and what his country did to him and all these things, that's what guides him. And so, and it's always underlying for Ev, no matter what he does, no matter how horrible it might be. It's he's a guy who's trying to do the right thing to some extent. So, and I think he suffers from a lot of the problems that we have, that a lot of the characters in this genre are very perfect. They, like I said earlier, they're the masters of their own universe. They never suffer. They never miss. They're very impressive people. Whereas Fade, you can kind of understand where he's coming from sometimes. He feels very human.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely not a superhero. He may do things and accomplish things that are a stretch for normal people, but he has to make interesting dilemma decisions. like one decision I'm thinking about is he kind of makes a deal with the devil almost for healthcare. Tell me about how you decided kind of how to bring him in and kind of the circumstances that you saddled him with.
Yeah, he was in a coma. He was brought out of it, and he was offered, rehab and all this
Yeah.
from kind of a mysterious group. And I mean, didn't really have any choice at that point, or he couldn't even walk. So they gave him a new identity. People think he's dead now, but there was a price to be paid for all this, which he knew. And it
Yeah.
was joining this group that is sort of made up by kind of, I guess, a cabal of billionaires who are really led by a man named John Lowe, who are trying to maybe use their power a little bit for good being in quotes,
Sure.
what they see as good. And that maybe the pursuit of more and more and more money that you don't need is not the most important thing. Though in truth, some are motivated by darker things, but he
Yeah.
surrounds himself and he's willing to go into those dark places. Fade's one of those people that he brings in to give. He's good at giving. John Lowe's good at giving at people what they want. And what Fade needs at this point is a life, a purpose. He needs to rehab. And so he gives him that, and he says, you can leave anytime if you want, but this is what you need, and I'm going to give it to you. And again, this is a situation of Fade getting sucked along in a way that Mitch Rapp never would.
Right.
And he's like, geez, I guess in a way I don't have anything better to do. What am I going to do? And so he gets sucked along in this and is really good at it. Not only from a killing standpoint, but also John Lowe comes to rely on his humanity.
Yeah.
As a check, on his power.
He can leave anytime he wants, but it feels a little bit like a Hotel California kind of. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never really leave. You get a kind of that feeling as well. Like, yeah, I'm going to go along with it and I'm good at it. But if I wanted to walk away tomorrow, could I? You're playing with that tension as well, which is.
Yeah. I mean, John Lowe can entangle people.
Yeah.
And it's subtle, but it's definitely happening. But Fade's a challenge because he doesn't, when he starts it, I think he comments, the guy says, what do you want? And he says, I don't really know. Whereas other people have very clear, you want money or women or whatever. Right. And, but he's like, well, I'm going to give you a purpose and that's what you need. And so, and it's not just the grander stuff. It's even Raya.
Yeah.
He gives her Raya and they form this bond. And now Fade's got to look out for her and he can't really just leave her behind. So it's all those little tentacles that have now captured him. Yeah. And like you say, it's very much a Hotel California.
Yeah. And like you alluded to earlier, in the international thrillers of the early 2000s, I'm thinking Vince Flynn, I'm thinking Tom Clancy, some of the other big names. There are big chess pieces that we're doing. U.S. versus Russia, a lot of that. Free Americans versus Islamic terrorism. That these kind of big ideas, and what we're discovering in Fade In is that a lot of times the real conflicts are more shadowy. They're things that appear good and righteous and just on the surface, and when you peel the layers back, it gets really murky. And if you dig too deep, you'll just not believe in anything anymore because things are just too muddy. And that's got to be a new way of thinking about justice and doing the right thing. And because things aren't as pretty as they seemed like they were at one time, or at least how we perceive them to be. I think we all can agree by now that things were never as black and white as we wanted them to be, but that's just, what it appeared. But it it seems like there's more room for nuance now. I think the readers are ready for to not paint with these broad strokes. That I think we're ready to explore the dark side of human nature, and even of goodness and justice. And like, do you feel, as the writer of these kind of books, that the reading audience is ready to be taken a little deeper and to explore things that might not have been comfortable at one time?
We'll see in a week.
Yes, we will. About 6 days from now.
I don't know. This is something I really thought about. I wanted to write this book, so I was going to write it. I would say that over the course of my career, which has been very long now, I'm probably going on 30 years. I would say there has been an increasing intolerance for nuance or for deeply exploring a character that is the motivations, let's say, of an antagonist. I'll give you a perfect example. It might have been even my first Mitch Rapp book. I was writing about an Iranian terrorist, and the guy was sitting there. He's college educated. He's going to blow something up in Israel or something.
Yeah.
And I kind of did this whole page on why he was doing it. And it kind of went into, our history, our very complicated history of the West, Great Britain, the United States, and Israel, or not Israel, but Iran, and the things that he felt that he had suffered at the hands of the West, and blah 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 blah. But like I said, I liked a well-motivated character, not just death to America. And Vince's editor read that and was like, "You've got to cut all this. You're scoring points against America." And I was like, "Well, yeah, but I mean, this is his perspective, right? I mean, hey, you've bombed us. You overthrew our democratically elected government and put in a dictator. You supported Saddam Hussein in a massive attack on us that killed 1% of our population, et cetera, right?" Mm-hmm. And now if you asked an American, you would say, "Well, let me tell you why we did those things." And then you'd be like, "Oh yeah, okay, I see your point there." So it goes back and forth, but no one is innocent in any of that. And so I thought it was interesting because I thought, well, a lot of people don't know our history with Iran. They see them as rogue nation or whatever. They don't know where they came from. And but I think she was right. I think I would have taken a real beating over that. So I feel like people are much more sensitive to labeling characters or putting them in a box. I mean, Americans, not so much foreign readers, but Americans are going to want to put you in a box, left or right, Democrat or Republican. In a way, it feels very much like living in Africa, where people put you in a tribal box. And you were part of the white tribe, or you were a Xhosa, you were, Zulu or whatever. And that was you almost couldn't escape that box. So it'll be interesting to see and to some extent, these books are a mirror. So people see what they want to see. I'll literally have people say, with one of the Mitch Rapp books, or a couple of them, I had this sort of evil president, and people would just write me just raging letters about how I meant that to be Trump and blah, that I was attacking Trump. And then the next day, inevitably, I get a letter saying, "You meant that to be Clinton or Obama. You're attacking." And I think, well, I've done my job here. No one can put this person in a box. And that's the challenge I want to give you. You're like, well, I mean, where does this guy fit in? And so I find partisanship to be extraordinarily boring and a huge cop-out. Oh, I'm going to say that guy's bad because he's a Republican or he's a Democrat. And I'm not going to listen to anything they have to say because they're evil and stupid. And it's a very lazy way of thinking. And if anything I can do with my books is try to break people of that habit.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what do you have planned for Fade? Like you said that you finished the first draft of a follow-up book. Do you have a grand arc planned, or are you taking it one book at a time? You know, can I get a contract for the next book, or what are you thinking for the future?
Yeah, it's impossible to plan ahead now.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's hard. In fact, I was just talking to an author about this. He's having to rewrite a bunch of his book. It's hard to just do a book that you think about, it's if you start from start to publication on a book is probably 18 months or something.
Yeah, right.
The whole world can change in 18 months.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is hilarious to think about, but when I started Fade In, the book that is not yet published, AI wasn't really a thing. Like seriously, I mean, it was kind of, I mention it in the book because it's like,
it was a hobby toy at best.
Yeah, it was something people were talking about. And, you write a thriller and you're like, oh, I always wanted to push the envelope and be like, it's tomorrow. Like thrillers are always written about next month. Right. And so I'm like, okay, but this, and in the process, I mean, I think there's an AI weapon in the first book or something, or in the first chapter. By the time I finished the first draft, that AI thing just seemed like old hat that I'd create. Like it wasn't even advanced enough. And so I had to, in the second draft, I had to change it. So it's crazy now.
Yeah.
To write, I mean, about anything and think, oh my God, please hold together. I mean, thank God I wrote Red War, a book about an invasion of Ukraine by Russia a few years, like 3 years before it really happened. Because can you imagine if you're putting the finishing touches on that novel and
yeah, and you're like, oh well, yeah.
But I never thought that had really happened. To be clear, I
Yeah.
thought I was on pretty safe ground there. It's not like writing about Israel or Iran or something where you never know. You're like, like Russia's not really going to attack Ukraine. Come
on. LOL. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're writing books like this, they do tend to be very timely. And like you mentioned Robert Ludlum earlier. I remember probably it may have been 20 years ago where I picked up the Bourne books, and I think I'd seen the first Bourne movie maybe, and I was like, oh, I really like this. I'm going to go back and read the novels. Well, the novels were written in the 70s, and Bourne's dipping into a payphone and he's hacking the payphone, and I'm like, whoa, this is very different, and so anytime you're chasing the bleeding edge, real time is going to surpass that bleeding edge, and it's going to look a little dated in the rearview mirror. How do you prepare for that, or can you prepare for that?
You can't. I mean, the funny thing is people still love those books. They just read them as historical fiction. I mean, I have personally written the sprint to try to find a payphone. Like I'm that old. Or my first book, like the days when you didn't have information, like you had to go to your investigator would go to the library and get the microfiche out.
Right.
Or you'd get lost.
Yeah.
Then it gets lost anymore. So and people love it. Like, I mean, I do. You go back and read Clancy.
Yeah.
I mean, go way back. There's nothing more fun to me than reading a historical novel that was originally written not as an historical novel, right? I mean, because it's super authentic. I mean, think about people, this is really a deep cut, but maybe like the book Tom Jones, which was probably written in the 1600s or something. Yeah. And it's a really fun book, but you're thinking, or even like the Three Musketeers, this was a contemporary novel. When it was written, the Three Musketeers was like a contemporary thriller.
Yeah.
Same with Moby Dick. That was the precursor to Tom Clancy, right? That was a contemporary nautical thriller. Right. And it's so fun because all the language and the detail and everything is right. So people go back and read like my first book, Rising Phoenix, and they just have a great time with it, particularly young people.
Yeah.
You know, what music was playing, you know, the old television, you know, you got cable, you just got cable,
Right.
you get the VCR or whatever. It's super fun. People are smoking in the office.
Right. Right. They're doing what? Yeah. That's so funny. Well, 6 days from now, Fade In, the brand new novel from Kyle Mills, drops at your favorite local bookstore. Go grab a copy. Get a hardback like I've got. What a beautiful presentation that is. If you don't have a great local bookstore, we'll put links in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon. I have not got to check out the audiobook yet. Have you heard the audio format of it, Kyle?
Yeah, it's great. It was really fun too, because I have never been involved in that.
Really?
No. And I got to this time. So you send it out. I didn't even know how this worked. You send it out and get auditions.
Yeah.
So you get to do like 600 words. So I picked the 600 words that I thought would be representative.
Yeah.
And we had 5 or 6 people read them, and
Nice.
they were all great. But this, I felt like a guy named Will Dameron, I feel like really did it. You know, I mean, he really got it. And I've had some communication with him. And in fact, we put a bonus thing in the back of the audio, which is an interview between he and I. And it's really interesting because I got to ask all the questions that I've always wondered as an audiobook fan. Like, you know, do you sit in a closet? How many, do you make mistakes constantly? What do you do when you make a mistake? All these things. So it's a great audio recording. I really loved it. And he's a really cool guy. And it's super interesting if you get the audio, listen to that interview, because yeah, you get to see how the sausage is made.
He narrated Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan, which is a fantastic audiobook. I knew his name sounded familiar. And The Last Green Valley. So many great books he's done. Neil Stephenson, Sebens's. Oh man, 25.
Yeah, we were really excited to get him.
Yeah,
super funny because, like, I mean, some of the people I had to listen to, which is really weird. Like audiobooks you've listened to, and then that person starts to try to read one of your characters. It's like, really surreal.
Surreal. I love it. Well, go grab Kyle's new book. You won't be disappointed, I promise. Kyle, tell everybody where they can find you online if they want to dig into your great back catalog and everything that you've got going on.
Yeah, so kylemills.com, easy to remember. You can check that out for info, and follow me on Kyle Mills Author, and that's Facebook, Instagram, and X. But we have great conversations there. You can, or drop me a line. I answer my email. So
excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Kyle, see you next year.
Yeah, always fun.